Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Sounds with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Love Bay family, we're rising out of the ashes together. On tonight, our topic is young people dealing with abuse, and our guest on this evening is Dr. KARL Morris. Dr. Morris has been with us before, and he graciously accepted the invitation to come back and be with us. As he is coming in, he'll be able to greet you for himself and tell you a bit about himself. But I want to start with sharing some of our resources. As usual, we are continuing to take in and collect donations, raise funds for our nonprofit Rise Out of the Ashes Inc. If you'd like to make a tax deductible donation, you can do that through our GoFundMe fundraiser, or you can write a check made payable to Rise Out of the Ashes Inc. You can send that to P.O. Box 15. We're in Drexel Hill, PA, 19026. Um, One of the biggest things that we do is our transitional resources. We help individuals who are victims and survivors of domestic violence with immediate and emergency funding. We help with funds for doctor's visits. We help with funds for food and clothing. We've helped individuals pay their utilities, rent, and mortgages. And we've also been able to help a couple of people continue on with their education. So that's something that we do as well. And also, if you would like to purchase my book, Suffering in Silence, that is available on Amazon. And we use proceeds from my book to help with what we do with Rise Out of the Ashes. I want to share with you substance abuse mental health services. Their national helpline is 800 662 4357. We have Befrienders volunteer action to prevent suicide. To find a helpline by your country, you can visit their website befrienders.org. And then in the United States, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org, and their number is 800-799-7233. In Canada, we have the Canadian Women's Foundation. Their website is canadianwomen.org. Their number is 866 293 4483. And then in the UK, we have the National Domestic Abuse Helpline. Their website is nationaldahelpline.org.uk. Their number is 0808 20 And also in the UK, we have Women's Aid, AID. Their website is womensaid.org.uk. And with that, we like to give Dr. Morris a moment to come in and to greet our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Good day.
Hey, Dr. Morris. So you wanna say hello to Love Bay again?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. As I heard you mention in your intro, this is my second time being on the show, and I actually enjoy our conversations, if only because it tends to go in a slightly different direction, slightly different topic area than I'm used to. I work in computer science, so I oftentimes look at technology, and a great deal of my time is spent looking at how technology is used in communities and in society. So when we've had our conversations, it's been interesting that I'm able to do sort of that deeper dive into how technology can impact and how it relates to these topics. So I'm excited to continue that conversation today.
So thank you so much. So I want to do this a little bit differently. So again, we know our topic is young people dealing with abuse. So before we go into the topic, I want to give you a moment to talk to us about your campaign for Congress. I don't know how or if we'll be able to tie that into our conversation on tonight. So I wanted to put that forth first. So can you give us an update on how that's going for you?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm currently a candidate for Pennsylvania's 3rd Congressional District. That's here in Philadelphia. And I'm campaigning on a platform of ensuring that we have a government better staffed with scientists and technologists, but more so in relation to dealing with the rise of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, and being aware of how this technology can be used, the impact it's going to have on society, and being able to properly legislate and regulate this technology, especially as it relates to the way that it can negatively impact marginalized communities like ethnic and racial minorities, women, and seniors. The data shows that these are the groups that oftentimes bear the brunt of they get the short end of the stick when it comes to how these technologies can impact communities. And my view of this is AI is going to be something else entirely. Everything we've seen ramped up to 100. Mm-hmm. So we need a Congress that is prepared for that. And I'm running on that platform. And so far, it's been great. People are very receptive to our message. It's a breath of fresh air, they'll tell us, because this is not a conversation that elected officials usually engage in. Understandably, it's very technical. There are a lot of moving parts, and it's not something they're usually necessarily qualified or able to have a conversation about. So I'm running because I think I'm probably one of the only candidates in the country that is able to have this type of conversation and address these deeply technical topics.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing it, because now I know how we're going to pull your campaign into this conversation. So again, we're talking about young people dealing with abuse. And so just right off the bat, we know that young people dealing with abuse, they're presented with challenges and issues that come with mental and emotional, physical impacts that involve trauma. And we know that abuse presents itself in different forms of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. Right. So our kids really need immediate and proper care and support, not just to cope, not just to get through, but to actually be able to heal and to be able to progressively move forward in their lives. And so I wanted to start with sharing a bit of an article. As I was doing my research and preparing, I came across an article that Gemma Strain wrote. This is from February 10th, 2025. This article is titled Understanding Emotional Abuse in Teenagers, and it's from missionprephealthcare.com. And one of the things that Jenna points out is that in hearing the word abuse, people often think of physical violence, but we really need to remember that the emotional trauma that kids also suffer and deal with, that's abuse as well. And it can impact our kids in just such a way that we as adults really don't even comprehend, because what our kids are dealing with and going through, it's like the levels of what they see and experience. It's just so different, from when we were children. And some teenagers, they don't even know what emotional abuse is. And so it's difficult for them to understand it. It's difficult for them to recognize it. It's difficult for them to explain it. But for the purposes of tonight, the definition that we're working here with is that emotional abuse is any purposeful or deliberate attempt to scare, humiliate, isolate, or control a teen. And another factor that we have to keep in mind is that abuse can come from different places or different people. So we have our young people who are dealing with teachers, friends, parents, siblings, other family members. They're dealing with boyfriends and girlfriends, social media. And another fact is that it's not only one area that any one child could be dealing with. You can have a child who's dealing with the aspect of abuse at home from family, and then in school from other kids or social media. And signs of abuse before, I'll ask you my first question of the night after this. Some signs of abuse in our young people that we can look for: mood swings. You can have mood swings. They can be not eating at all, or the opposite, start eating too much. There are times that they may harm themselves or start isolating themselves and not participating in activities or, things that they once enjoyed doing. All of a sudden, they just may shut down and close themselves off. Low self-esteem or people pleasing, wanting to be there, do everything for everybody. And these are things I would say, if you've not seen it before, Like if there's a quick adjustment and it grabs your attention, these are signs that we can look forward to. So I would start by asking you, what are your thoughts on the issue itself of us having to deal with our young people and abuse, and some ideas on how to combat the issue?
So, you mentioned quite a few things, and
I
no,
just pick one.
you're saying that because I could have done a deep dive on any of them, but now it's like a list. I don't have the list, so but
Right.
but let's start. Let's take the 30,000 foot view and kind of start at the top and say. So you started by mentioning perhaps one of the most important things when I, as an individual, look at this, which is how different it is for our young people today versus what it was like 25, 35 years ago, when we were growing up. And this immediately dovetails, into my wheelhouse, which is recognizing the big issue, the big difference between today and 30 years ago is the technology that's available to us. And the essentially us always being online, always being available, always being plugged in. And that has a lot of negatives, a lot of positives, and we can address those independently. But certainly, as it relates to the different types of abuse that our young people are exposed to, one of the big motivators I think here is that there is no respite, right? There is no place that you get away from it. It's continuous, or it can be continuous, and basically your bullies, your abusers can reach you regardless of where you are, regardless of the time of day. You might think back to a schoolyard bully where maybe you had a terrible time at school because this is the type of thing you had to deal with when you were in a classroom or when you were on campus. But now that person and that group, they can reach you wherever. They can do whatever. They can spread rumors and talk about you, and those things spread. That word gets back to you, and that has a negative effect on your emotional well-being. So there are just so many vectors that you can be impacted today. Where it was sometimes to say it was a simpler time 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not even doing a necessary anywhere near a good job listing all the ways that just the technology that we see today can impact that. The poster child is obviously social media, and we can dissect all the ways that can be impactful. There is people having sharing media, sharing information. I've seen or heard stories of maybe someone gets in a fight, maybe they're bullied, and it's recorded, and then that video is being shared with people, and so whereas before it would just be whoever happened to witness it at the time, now it's your entire school, and it's shared online, and it's so where do you go to escape that? And one escape that you didn't mention, and clearly because it has a very terminal outcome, is a lot of times. And why it's important for us to be able to identify these things is that there is, of course, an uptick in the number of young people that end up, taking their lives because they're unable to cope with the onslaught. And we're not built for this. We're not wired for this. So it's extremely important that, especially the adults in the room, be vigilant and being able to identify these things. And that's assuming that the adult in the room is not the source of the abuse. Right. So it's an extremely complicated and multifaceted area that we will certainly have quite a bit to discuss.
Mm-hmm. So as this is part of your platform, I know it's not just shining light on the issue. Right. It's what do we do? So do you have some specific thoughts on what to do? Because specifically talking about social media, the internet, and we're talking about AI, I do not think that it's fair to say to a child, well, don't use your phone. Well, turn your computer off. Well, when you get home, just, you just don't participate in social media at all. That part of your life is just gone. So I don't think that that's a fair answer. I think there's a difference between monitoring social media use, but then having a victim you just take that completely away without an actionable causative theory or consequence behind it. So do you have an idea of what to do in that area?
So absolutely. So this is the type of thing that you can affect with legislation. These are the type of things you can affect with technology. And of course, the amalgamation of those two things is sort of the synergy is kind of what you're looking for. So first and foremost, we can start with the simple things, which are what are the rules that we can make about how these tools are utilized, what's allowed, what is not allowed, especially when it comes to protecting children. We oftentimes think about the different ways that our young people can be reached online, right? So, a lot of my points so far have been placed in the context of a schoolyard and you being abused by your peers. But of course, we know that when you're online, this abuse can come from anywhere. These can be people of varying age groups who might find and target with whatever intentions, target individuals. And these are the type of things where we can look to many different jurisdictions that have already tried to address these things. So making it the responsibility of the platforms to govern who is able to access, not just access the tools in general, but who are other users allowed to gain access to. So random strangers, random adults online, for example, making it impossible for them to communicate with young people on our social media platforms would be a start. This could be something that all of these tools, these social media platforms, can begin to implement. There are lots of technical details involved in this, certainly, but at the very least, making that a rule and working towards it is something that can be done. And in terms of being able to spot and then put in place guardrails and protections, interestingly enough, this is one of those things that artificial intelligence can actually be very good at. And I'm happy for an opportunity to sing the praises of AI, because a lot of the stuff I talk about, especially on the campaign trail, is about the harms and negatives. And we're going to talk about some of that here too. Mm-hmm. But just to give AI its flowers, so to speak, you can easily utilize artificial intelligence as a tool that can monitor the types of communications that are being passed among, say, young people. And that's a tool that is exceptionally good at detecting the type of dialogue or the type of communication that could be deemed abusive, and flag it and block it, including as far as severing the communication channel between those two individuals. So it's the type of thing where if a person is being bullied or abused online through chat or the exchange of images or video, artificial intelligence can identify the perpetrators, put a stop to the communication, and then report it as necessary to the necessary authorities or guardians as are specified. These are the type of things and tools that could be put in place immediately. Like, that's not some far in the future technology. That's things that we've been able to do now for years. We just need to have companies be motivated to build these tools in. So right off the bat, again, these are the type of things that we can start to implement. In California, they've done a lot of work on the legislative side towards this. They've certainly, as far as the 50 states are concerned, they've been the strongest in terms of protecting children online. A lot of times, just things like what is their data, who is allowed to collect their data, and what can you do with it is an interesting and good starting point. But just also allowing certain protections and automatic protections so that you don't facilitate bullying, you don't facilitate abuse through your platforms is something that can be done today. And then on the other side of it, and this is kind of where we have to kind of look back at how this technology can be harmful. There has been an uptick, and there's a good side and a bad side, but there's been an uptick in young people turning to artificial intelligence, turning to these tools as a coping mechanism when they are abused, whether that is because they don't, they don't feel necessarily safe, or they don't trust the adults in their lives, or they're ashamed or embarrassed, and they turn to tools to do this and, to confide in or ask for advice. And, when it works, it works. But
when it's wrong, it's wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we don't know when it'll be one or the other. And that can be a huge problem. And it can have, the worst possible outcomes, right? The worst thing you can think of that can and has happened, where someone confiding in artificial intelligence and saying, telling it what they were thinking of doing,
Mm-hmm.
and the AI encouraged it and told the child not to tell an adult when the person said they were thinking about it. So this is a real life incident that occurred. You can you
Yes.
can look it up. So clearly that's not something we want. And at the same time, it's like, well, is there a way that we can facilitate this type of thing? Back in 2010, when I just started my doctoral research, I was in an area called affective computing, where affective computing is sort of this amalgamation of computer science and psychology and cognitive science. And one of the things that it tries to do is identify emotions in people, have computer systems that can identify emotions in people as a way to sort of generate and build context. So it understands, it has a filter with which to interpret what somebody's saying. And then, of course, the other side of this is it tries to mimic emotions and show empathy based on that. And one of the things that we discovered very early, I joined this research team later, is that individuals, young people at the time, these were the ones that were involved in the research, in the study, were far more likely to open up to a machine, to an avatar. And this is back in 2010. The technology back then is nothing like it is today. But even then, people were far more likely to be open and honest with a screen than they were with an actual therapist, with an actual counselor. So whatever that tendency is in us, the question becomes, is there a way to use the tools, to use the technology as an outlet while somehow ensuring that we don't have the negative outcomes that are possible? So that we have to do more work there. We have to do more research there, but certainly it's a double-edged sword at the moment.
So let me ask you this. Dr. Sakala was on the program last week, and we were talking about, one of the things that we mentioned was that when we were starting in college, there was actually a class, Intro to Computing. I started at Drexel University. There was a class that taught us how to use a computer, how to search the internet. I mean, bare bone basics. So my question to you is, do you think it's feasible to actually have a class that's really bare boned on AI to teach our young people, I think, how to decipher images that aren't real, that can just be put together, how to decipher information that's that's not going to bring you to a good point. Is that even
Sure.
that facilitated?
Yeah. Do you want a comforting answer or?
No.
So, in theory, would that be good? Yes, absolutely.
In theory,
If we're just listing what are the potential benefits or the benefits we would like to get from that, absolutely, right? We would want to be able to teach those things. The problem is we don't even know it to teach it, right? This is an arms race we're in. This ability to, you mentioned being able to identify images. So let's just talk about deep fakes. The ability to generate images and video that look realistic. It's improving every day, right? And sometimes the changes are gradual, and if you are constantly exposed to it, maybe you don't even realize it. But go back and look at any deepfake video from 2 years ago, and look at one just generated today, just so you can see how stark the difference is. And it doesn't matter how good it is today; it's going to be better tomorrow. So, in terms of being able to identify any artifact or characteristic of any kind of video or image or audio, for that matter, and look for markers to tell us that it's artificial, that it's a deepfake, is a lost cause. We're not going to be able to arm individuals, arm humans with that ability. the best you can hope for is to look for context. Does this thing make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be unique for every situation. But it won't be able to, you're not going to get very far trying to say, does this thing look real? The answer is going to, if not today, tomorrow, the answer will be yes. It's going to look real. It's going to sound real. It's going to behave in a realistic manner.
And
That's
like,
just
what is the
the
regulation like? So if this is an issue, AI as a whole, that we can take to Congress or legislation,
Yeah.
what does regulation look like for those who are creating these deep fake images, for those who are creating these programs that are telling our children, don't tell that you feel this way, don't tell that you're going through this? What's the regulation?
So it's going to be multifaceted, right? There is no one thing. And we can go for, there are certain low-hanging fruits, absolutely. You can tell the large platforms, and you can have these things be triggered depending on, the number of users that you have. You can regulate that these large platforms must have these capabilities, these protections, these guardrails on their tools. But and where I have to stress this point, that's not a silver bullet. That won't solve the problem, because you don't have to go to Facebook to see a fake video. Somebody can just generate these things in their own home.
Mm-hmm.
And if we believe that there's a way to use legislation to stop what somebody can build in their own home with tools that they got or built themselves, that's going to be extremely difficult. So in a sort of a roundabout way, one of the ways we can address this is actually funding more research into the technology, funding more research into the field, mechanisms that allow us to detect. And I mentioned earlier, and I'll repeat right now, it is an arms race, because it doesn't really matter how good your technology is for detecting. Once we know how you're detecting, we can now build technologies that evade those detection mechanisms. So there is no perfect solution here. So yeah, starting with the large platforms, we can require that they build in certain things, and so whether that is deepfakes or it's looking for the type of exchanges or the type of behavior on their platforms that might suggest certain things are taking place, abuse or something similar. Yeah, absolutely, that's something we should be doing, but we also need to be funding research into ensuring that we are as best as we can be one step ahead of the quote unquote bad guys,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that there will always be rearming, and we have to do the same. So to take this back to sort of where we started, which is, how do you prepare young folks? The reason that class was necessary when you were in college, the reason that class was necessary when I was in college, was because the technology was new, and the reach and the adoption was always slow, right? The internet took easily 20 years before it became popular, before you could take it for granted that everybody, in air quotes, everybody, there are still 30 million Americans that don't have ready access to the internet, and 8 million Americans that don't have access at all. So it's not everyone. But before you and I could take it for granted in an urban area that, okay, people have access to the internet, mobile phones took about 12 years before we could assume that people had access.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while. ChatGPT, that has the record for the fastest adopted technology in history. Because now that the internet is accessible, now that the foundation is laid, once I launch a website, you just log on and you have it. So it has the record of the fastest adoption. And I'm sure you're aware, the young folks are the ones who are on it first. They're on it first. They're on it the most. They're the ones digging in and figuring out how it works. So they could teach a class to us, in fact, it turns out. So there isn't a whole lot of room necessarily for that introduction to how you can use this technology. What we can do, and so there's still different spaces and areas we can go into. So, for example, I give these classes where I talk about ethics of artificial intelligence, and I talk about how the tool can have bias and these other issues built in, how we in society need to be able to spot and identify areas where the system's bias can impact us, especially in harmful ways. And what are our considerations? What are our responsibilities as individuals in a society when the tool, just acting like a tool and it's trained on our data, is able to do certain things? What are our obligations to each other? And what does it mean for these tools to act ethically?
The age group of your class, when you teach that class, what's the age group?
So I'm actually going to teach the next. So usually I would teach this to like freshmen when we would talk about very specific scenarios. But
freshmen in college.
Excuse me,
freshmen in college. Okay.
College freshmen. I'm sorry, it's college freshmen. But I'll be teaching in a month. I need to go double check. I'll be teaching this at a section where it'll be all adults. Just be giving a 2-hour lecture on this topic, and I've done similar things over the past few years. So because it resonates with everyone, right? And there are lots and lots of ethical questions. Some of them relate specifically to the technology, but others relate to us, right? So I'll give you a simple example. So self-driving cars, for example, are much safer than cars with actual drivers behind them, to orders of magnitude safer. However, it turns out that when self-driving cars do have accidents, especially including fatal accidents, because of the type of sensors that they use and how they process information, they tend to actually hit and kill individuals with darker skin. So the ethical dilemma here is, if self-driving cars are safer overall, but when they do cause harm, they cause it almost exclusively to dark-skinned individuals, should we as a society accept that technology? It's a weird question, because again, the number overall is lower than any other if we had all self-driving cars, but are we willing to accept a technology that is safer overall but is harmful exclusively to Black and brown people? Even if the numbers are less, it's a very interesting thing that we have to think about. And those are the type of questions that, as AI becomes more prolific, becomes more ingrained in society, we're going to have to ask those questions. Not just, is the technology doing good or bad, but how do we want that technology to be used in our society?
Right.
So when it comes to things like how these technologies can be used for nefarious means, like how it might encourage an individual to behave or act, and hide information from a parent or a loved one, or all these other things, we need to actually have a conversation about what that might mean.
Right. So I think that leads into our next point, because on the other side of the issue, we have young people who are the actual perpetrators of abuse. So it's not just we want to defend and stand up and protect our children. We also have the issue that some of our children are the abusers. Whether they're acting out what they see, whether they're acting out what they learned, what's going on in their own homes, or even if they haven't experienced it and they're just doing it for whatever reason. The question then becomes, what do we do about the kids who are perpetrators? I want to share a bit more information from another article, and this is from Ashna Huranag. She's a correspondent for Sky News. This is a news outlet in the UK, and her article is from last summer, August 13th, 2025. And Ashna pointed out that there's a rise in abusive teen relationships, with the internet being a tool helping the numbers to grow. And Kate Lexon, she's a director for services at Tinder, which is a charity that conducts workshops on healthy relationships in primary and secondary schools and colleges. And that charity has been doing this for over 20 years. But Kate says, we're finding students at ages 9, 10, and 11 that are talking about strangulation. They're talking about attitudes they've read online and starting to bring in some of those attitudes from some of those misogynic influencers. And then in that same article, Elahai Walizada, she's the senior program manager for children and young people at Refuge. That's a nonprofit that provides specialist services to survivors of domestic violence. Elahai says that frontline workers are telling us that young people are telling them that abuse usually starts from smaller signs like coercive control, such as the perpetrator stopping them from seeing friends or family, and then it builds. So one thing is not only abuse an issue for our young people, but we're talking about an international issue of our young people dealing with abuse, being abused and being perpetrators. Um, Also, within this article, Refuge shared, there was a rise in incidents between April 2024 and March 2025. Psychological abuse was the most commonly reported, affecting 73% of young women and girls. 49% of that number said their perpetrator threatened to harm them. Another 35% said their perpetrator threatened to kill them. Among 62% of 16 to 25-year-olds surveyed, half of them said they had been strangled or suffocated. And again, the point is we're talking about children. We're
Yeah.
talking about kids doing this to kids.
Yes. So
Yeah, it leaves you speechless.
yeah. Uh,
It leaves you speechless.
yeah, and I mean, it, you're not throwing any softballs, right? And and so the challenge is where do you even begin to tackle this
Yeah.
problem, right? There's so many different areas here that we can speak to, and like, even if you remove the technological, the technology layer,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about you're talking about police, you're talking about um, um, people who've decided to, for whatever their intentions, whatever their own mental states, have decided to harm or hurt other individuals, threaten and potentially take it further. Um, and this is not that part is not a new conversation. Clearly, that has always been the case, and so any conversation like this, you sort of do have to look at how things are different now. Uh, but I think perhaps there's something to be learned from, or at least strategies that we can try to implement, trying to figure out, well, how did we try to solve it before, right? So this was about the adults in the room, again, the authority figures being able to identify these things and report it as necessary. So a bully in a school, if a teacher or the principal knew about it, right, that would be reported to the parent on the assumption that the parent, this was only being allowed to happen because the parent was not aware. So making them aware might have been one of the strategies to help address it. And then now you ask, well, is there a way we can replicate the outcome or the capability in this new context where we're online, where we're using social media, where we're using messaging applications? And the answer is yes and no. Sort of what I mentioned before, this idea that artificial intelligence, even basic systems, we don't even need the most advanced systems, can be very good at identifying threatening content, can be good at identifying negative content, even without using it in nefarious ways like training it or storing it, just analyzing it as it's in transit or before it's delivered. And if the technology is good enough to flag it, then the only question is, okay, now that we flag it, what do we do next? And that next can be identifying authorities, can be identifying the parent or guardian, as long as it's known who the parent or guardian is. So now we get to that other layer that needs to be in place, and this is where legislation comes in. Do we just want to grant children carte blanche access to all of these tools, all of these platforms? I'm going to sit here and tell you, no, we should definitely block it. We should just remove their access. But maybe there's something in between where we say the children are under a certain age, for them to get a Facebook account, for them to get an Instagram account, for them to get a TikTok account, a parent or guardian has to authorize it. And they're on file as being, they're in the database as being, this is the authoritative entity in this person's life. And if something goes awry, if they're being abused or they are an abuser, here's who we notify.
Yeah.
As a way to say that's a first step. So technology can step in here. It is not a panacea. It won't solve the whole thing, but if nothing else, we can be informed by what strategies we would have used in the absence of technology, and then see how technology can replicate and in some ways even enhance those approaches. So I think that's the kind of thing that we can look for. Perhaps the bigger problem, as I see it, is in the absence of legislation. Uh, you're not going to really find a lot of these companies choosing to do these things because there's a cost. There's a cost to build it. There's a cost to maintain it, and if all they're looking at is their profits and their bottom line, then there needs to be some external pressure, whether that is shame because their users or society as a whole shines a light on this and said this needs to be addressed, uh, or legislation or lawsuits, whatever it is. But they have to be moved, right? We should disabuse ourselves of any idea that there are any good corporations out there that want to do the right thing. No, every corporation wants to make a profit, and that's the only thing that motivates them. So perhaps there needs to be laws in place that say for children of a certain age, they cannot just sign up for an account on your platform without these authentications, without this authority or this parent or this guardian being listed and contactable, and they must approve. And then they can get reports like, here's what this child was doing on the platform this past week or this past month. So we're not even going to make it passive. You must see and approve, like, okay, yes, this is all fine. They can continue to utilize your platform. Or they can analyze and say, well, I don't know who these men are talking to my young daughter. I'm going to step in here and do something.
Yeah.
So, there are ways that the technology can be useful. Thankfully, it is in a way an enabler of some of these new types of threats that we have, but it can also be the solution.
So I think tonight is about putting a conversation on the table, because there's not one answer. We're not going to come to a definite conclusion on tonight. What we definitely know is that our young people are involved in abuse, whether there are victims or whether they're the perpetrators. And there's not an answer, but I think opening the door to have a conversation, and this is an issue that is touching us around the world. So it doesn't matter where you live. To have a 9 or 10-year-old not just talking about strangulation, but actually doing it. A 9 or 10-year-old strangling his or her boyfriend or girlfriend. A 9 or 10-year-old taking a cell phone of a girlfriend or boyfriend, going through their text messages, stopping them from contacting parents. I mean, we're talking about literally babies. So I think, again, the point of tonight is to put the conversation on the table. I don't think it's about laying blame. I really don't. I think parents do need to become aware. Parents do need to be active, but I don't think it's fair to just say this is a problem for the parent, because there are some parents who are doing what they need to do. They are caring for their children physically, mentally, and emotionally. But when they send them out the door, they meet, a whole different world. So I think it's parents, it's school, it's legislation, it's the neighborhood. And then, unfortunately, we do have those children who are repeating behaviors that they see in their own home. So there's another level of help that needs to be made available for kids who are in a traumatic environment, and they are literally mimicking and doing what they see. This is it's a sad issue, but and it's not like I didn't know this before tonight. It's not like I didn't know this before we were going to have this conversation, but to continually see this information in black and white, to continually see the numbers that are growing. I mean, I remember being 5 years old and learning my colors. I remember, in the crayon box, and and so, because my mother was telling me, that I was black. I'm like, okay, I'm brown. Like, being 5 years old, just trying to understand that concept in my 5-year-old mind. But now you got 5 and 6 and 7 year olds hurting each other, 9 and 10 year olds. They're not talking about colors in a crayon box.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge leap from where we were. But again,
Right.
I don't think it's about laying blame. Um,
Right.
and I know, and it's not easy to come up with an answer. I know it's not. And I do want to ask you this. Do you believe that access to education would play an effective and positive role in students' lives? And when I say education, I'm not talking about prevention awareness on abuse. I mean, like STEM, science, technology, engineering, or history, arts, whatever it is. Do you think children having access to that would be a positive influence?
Short answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
If only we're talking about occupying their time and giving them something to do.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right that it's not it's not about picking on any one entity or issue and saying the blame lies there, or even necessarily putting a solution on the table and saying here's how we fix it. You're right in saying it's the environment, right? And we have to take this holistic view. What is your home life like? What is your environment? What is your school life like? What is the economic situation of you and your family?
Mm-hmm.
What is who are your parents, and what's that life like? So there is not going to be any single approach to fixing this. We just have to basically say, well, what is their environment? When we think of it that way, it's very easy for us to sort of see, well, what's different in the environment of children today versus a couple of decades ago. And again, it's that access, right? So at 5 years, you were using or looking at colors because by and large, information being fed to you came from your parents or your teachers, and by and large, that seems like an age appropriate topic. But now when a child has an iPad and access to the entire internet and all that comes with it, that there are no guardrails. So the outcome can be anything. It is unpredictable. But certainly one can see where without guidance, anything is possible, but very likely something negative can come out of this. Yet we're not thinking that, oh, this young kid is going to accidentally learn quantum physics. No, they're going to be exposed to the manosphere and this misogyny and this abuse, or inappropriate videos and images and text. And, because it's easier for those things to be surfaced, even accidentally, than things that are useful and interesting. So insofar as we can exert some control over the environment and the exposure that our children and young people have, I think that can help us move in the right direction. And to your point, education, and if that's kind of what we control and that is the conduit, that's what we point them towards as a way to fill the void, absolutely. That's something that it gives you something to do. Folks find it interesting or confusing when I tell them, like when they ask what do you do for fun, I say, oh, I program. I sit at my computer and I write code. I do that for fun because I like solving things. I'm a problem solver. I'm a puzzle person, and writing code for me is I'm just solving puzzles all day. So I find that intellectually stimulating, and it's a good pastime. But if I wasn't exposed to this at a very young age, that probably wouldn't be what I'd spend my time doing right now. I'd be doing something else, hopefully equally as productive, but who knows? So controlling that environment, nourishing and encouraging intellectual pursuits for our young people. You're going to have a hard time telling me that there's a downside to that. I only see upsides. One of the few things in this world where I see it's just as upside, but making them well-rounded, of course, but absolutely showing them and exposing them to these different things as a way to fill that void, fill that gap. They say kids don't get bored anymore. They're not allowed to be bored because they have all of these outlets. Like, okay, well, let's fill those outlets with productive things. So yeah, I actually think that's one of the approaches we can do. It takes hands-on. It takes the parents being present and active. It takes schools being a holistic environment. That's not just, well, what do you do when you're in a classroom? but creating an environment that extends outside of the borders of that classroom and encourages learning, continuous learning, and engagement with material that is useful and helpful.
So as you're moving through your campaign, do you see an uphill battle? Do you see this new regulations, legislations? Do you see it eventually falling into place?
This is going to sound odd, but well, maybe or self-aggrandizing, I suppose. But it could happen. But I think for it to happen, you really are going to need people who know the technology in the room. We've had a few decades now of data to tell us that Congress, they don't engage with technology. And again, as somebody in the field, I've been a technologist now for the better part of 30 years. I worked in artificial intelligence now for about 16 years. I can tell you, right, yeah, of course you're not going to engage with it. It's very complicated. It's very hard. There is no one answer to the question, well, how are you going to fix this? It's like, you have to get into the weeds. You have to be able to analyze the context, and it's not necessarily one piece of legislation. It's going to be a series of regulations implemented at different levels in different areas. So it's super complicated. That's the entire reason why I decided to run for Congress, because I am convinced that if people like me don't get out of the classroom and get out of the labs and say, we actually have thoughts on how these things can be fixed, we just need access to the levers to fix it. If we don't get up and say we're going to run for office and we're going to help put the regulations in place, I just don't think it's going to happen. I view artificial intelligence as the most transformative thing, the most transformative technology that we as a species have ever come across. There is no aspect of our lives that this will not touch. I think going forward, there will be no policy debate that is not also a conversation about artificial intelligence and how it will impact that policy. And if the folks in Congress are not including AI in that conversation, then they're committing political malpractice. And when they do that, it is we, the citizens, that are going to be hurt. So it's an uphill battle, absolutely, because a part of my campaign, the entirety of my campaign, is ensuring people hear this message. Like, they all kind of hear about AI and they have this sense of, well, we're not really sure. I don't like it, but I'm not sure what it is. And I want people to know, okay, here's what it is. Here's what it means for you. It's changing rapidly. And what it means will be different as the days and months and years go on. But let's not pretend that this is not going to be impactful in your lives, the lives of your children, the lives of your family, your community, your jobs, your healthcare, the environment. It's going to touch on all of these things, and not in a trivial way. And Congress has a closing window if they're going to actually be able to effectively regulate this. In a few years, if we don't start doing something, it may be too late. So this is as important a topic as there has ever been. Yes. And we need technologists and scientists in Congress to deal with it.
Well, Dr. KARL Morris, computer science professor, KARL for Congress. Thank you so much for being here. We're just under the hour, but what I want to say to our family out there, if your child is dealing with abuse on the end of being a victim, if your child is dealing with abuse on the end of being a perpetrator, there is help. The same domestic violence agencies that are there for women and men, those agencies are available for children. So if you need help for your child, you can reach out if your child is the victim, if your child is perpetrator. And I would never say a child that commits a harm should just be taken and thrown away. That child needs help in some kind of way. So reach out to domestic violence agencies to get help that you need, to get counseling and to move forward. You can also reach out to domestic violence agencies for your school to have prevention awareness. If there are teachers that are listening and you want to bring help into your school for your 5th, 6th graders, for your 7th graders, high school students going into college, even if you're on college campuses, if you want help, it is there. So I don't want to leave us with the feeling of all is lost. The numbers are increasing and that's just it. No, there is something that you can do. even if it's a small thing. Make the phone call, get the information, and intervene for your child as a victim or a perpetrator. And so, with that, Dr. Morris, as we leave on tonight, I would ask for you to leave Love Bay with your final words on this evening as you continue your campaign.
Sure. So let me close by, continuing or building on what you mentioned, which is how important it is to uh, be vigilant, be aware, and be in a position to intervene. And there are lots of resources, as you've mentioned, that folks can utilize. So they don't need to feel alone. They don't need to feel as if they're out of their element or overwhelmed in any way. I think last time I was on, I sort of gave you my own perspective on this, which is, we have victims and victims. Perpetrators are victims themselves, and no one is born to affect these negative things on the world around them. There's something about them that they also need help. So if we start to think of everyone as being a victim in the situation and understanding that we help victims, we don't necessarily punish, but we try to find a way to make this situation better. I think that's a very healthy perspective to take and an approach that helps all of us. So, rely on those resources. In a world where technology and social media and everything else is ever present, the task is that much more difficult, but it is not impossible. You just have to have focus, be driven, be motivated, and be willing to do the work. So, use those resources as best you can, and let's help our young people.
Awesome. Dr. Morris, thank you so much again for being here with us. Keep us updated on your campaign. We want to know how that turns out. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence TV. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe via whichever platform you're watching us by. Thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes